Just a big old sign-a-rooney.
Okay.
There you go, dude.
Then let's sign a room. All right, right on.
Cool.
Good. Right on. Thank you, man.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Cool.
Good.
Well, I gotta get going.
All right.
Gotta chug some more Red Bulls, get some more energy for the rest of the day.
Okay.
Later,
right
dude.
on. Good. We'll see you, man.
Oh, no. What's up, dudes?
Everyone say bye. Everyone say bye. I'm kind of check and see what we have happening in here real quick. And everything. Oh, this is cool. This is cool. These are pictures of youth ministry, which is kind of the life that Susie and I have lived. There's some cool memories happening in these pictures. Kind of neat. I remember at a young age, I kind of felt a call into ministry. You know, my dad was doing it, but I didn't know anything about ministry. I didn't know anything about what God would do through a willing person. I didn't feel like I had a whole lot of qualifications or a whole lot of things that really kind of worked that way. But God saw something. As a matter of fact, I remember one time, one of my 15 minutes of fame as a 6-year-old is we kind of felt there was a moment where God healed me, and in giving a testimony in front of all of Calvary Assembly, which is the fastest growing church in the nation, was in Orlando, and it's a church we went to years back, 25 years back. And I remember as a little 6-year-old, somebody was interviewing me and asked me, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to be like your dad? You know, do you want to be a missionary? And I said, no, I want to be a California highway patrolman like Ponch. And I had dreams as I wanted to ride the motorcycle going dun 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 dun. You know, that's what I wanted. Everybody wanted to be Officer Poncherello. So, how many of y'all loved chips when you were, yeah, all right, right on, good. But as life went on and I became a teenager, I was 17 years old, and I just really gave my life over to the Lord, and I said, you know what, from this point on, God, you can have me in whatever way you need. And I started interning. I'm talking interning like, I don't even mean the cool kind of interning. I mean the kind of interning where I was stapling papers all day and interning like I was running, errands and stuff like that. But I really felt, well, I needed a grace package, even just for the entry-level part of ministry. I needed a special grace package for that time. And then there came a time where we got a phone call at my desk there, being an intern at the church, and they told me of a place not too far away that needed a youth pastor. They've got just a handful of kids. It's not that big of a church. Do you want to go be the youth pastor? And I prayed about it. I even drove down and went to that city, checked it all out. And that's why these are cool pictures. And, we really felt God was telling us, we weren't even married at this time, but God was telling us, yeah, go be youth pastors at this place in Sebring, Florida. And in a few months, we went down and became youth pastors there. And it's interesting because that's where Josh Croft, our guitar player, was a teenager in our youth ministry, at our very first youth ministry. And we needed a special grace package to go into youth ministry. There's no doubt about it. It wasn't way too long after that. I was invited to go on a missions trip, and we went for that first opportunity. I had the chance to go and speak to some other people in another country. But I needed a special grace package for that. That was different than all the other grace packages that had arrived before that. That God knew what I needed right when I needed it each time. I remember a time at a youth camp while we were youth pastors at this first place that some of our leaders, my old youth pastors and guys that had always been leaders to us, I remember a time during an amazing, beautiful altar time at Summer Celebration Youth Camp, and I was on the front row because I was always there as the intern to kind of serve those guys and stuff. And I remember being up there, and I remember these guys in a very special time were kneeling, 5 or 6 of these youth pastors. And they were kneeling, and the keyboard was playing real gently, and teenagers, there were 1,400 teenagers there at that time, and kids, some of them were crying in the presence of God, some had their hands up. It was such a moment. And I remember one of those guys, as they were kneeling on the front of the stage, they motioned for me to come over there. And I did, and I knelt down with these guys. They were arm in arm, and one of those guys said, Aaron, you know what? It's time that you don't serve us anymore. Now you're one of us. And it might as well have been heaven delivering a grace package at that point. Because from there, I remember we had an opportunity to be youth pastors in Titusville, Florida, on the Space Coast. And when we went there, and I'll never forget this first night, we were in this tiny little room. It was the offices of a real estate company right there at the front of our church's property. They gave us that room for youth ministry. And I remember that night we just had a handful of kids. There were only about, 15 kids or so. And Karen, our keyboard player, was one of those kids in that youth ministry from day one. And we went there that night, and we looked at the small space, we looked at the small numbers, but we saw something bigger than what we saw with our eyes. And we preached our guts out that night, ministered to those kids, prayed for those kids that night, inspired vision in those kids that night. And basically a grace package from heaven showed up for us to do that next season of our lives. And within a year, that youth ministry grew to 50 kids, stayed at 50 kids for about a year. But in the second year of existing, that youth ministry had a move of God happen that was just mind-blowing. It grew from 50 kids to 250 kids over the course of a summer. And it set that tiny little town on its ear. And from there, God gave us the opportunity and the chance to stay there 7 years of our life and just sowed into those kids. From there, God gave us the chance to go to Shoreline Christian Center in Austin, Texas. Now we were about 10 years deep in youth ministry. And we showed up in Austin, Texas to 500 teenagers in our youth ministry from day one because the church was big. And I'm like, Lord, you're going to need to bring one of those big grace packages, a very special, because I'm freaked out, Lord. How do I deal with a ton of kids? But God brought that, and he gave that to us. And we were there 5 years, and there we were able to see some cool things happen. And what I love about that is Christian Sanchez was in that youth ministry in Austin. And I look now at what God has done in our lives, and I see people who've been important to our lives, who've served us. God's given us everything we need to sow into their lives, but today we find that we've partnered back with them in ministry to touch other people's lives. Well, then the greatest grace package that showed up was when God spoke to Susie and I and told us to plant a church in a city that we've never lived in, where we didn't know one person. And I'm thinking, Lord, do you even do that to people? I mean, it's not even fair. And that was a big grace package that showed up. We worked and we worked, and we saw God do amazing things. But you want to know what's interesting? As we planted Canvas Church about 2.5 years ago or so, the biggest grace package, as far as I'm concerned, was not week number 1 when we had our debut service in the movie theater. We had 79 people. I knew we'd have a crowd like that. The biggest grace package was for the following Sunday. Would any of those people come back? Are they even going to give a rip? All right. And our church grew in 1 week from 79 people to 39 people like that. And I thought, that's how many came back. And God just kept supplying what he needed to supply to us. God just kept giving what he needed to give to us. And all of that it's so important. It's so important. As God takes us forward in life, he gives us all that we need to accomplish all that he's directing us to do, whether it's parenting or marriage or ministry or career. All of these things are important, and they're important to God. Hey, Taylor.
Yeah?
Yeah. Hey.
What's up?
Hey.
Do you have something going on?